inside and get yourself something cool to drink.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Between the Lines podcast. I'm your host, Lost in Translation. Welcome back to the Black Man Unfiltered Network. You know what? Tonight's podcast is going to be a doozy. You know what I mean? And it was actually sparked by a podcast that we did Tuesday with Darwin McPherson. And we were actually talking about a particular topic. And at the end of the topic, we really didn't get into it like we wanted to, but it was talking about the collapse of a colony when we're talking about the experiment with the mouse colony that we talked about with John Calhoun. And it got me to thinking. I was thinking about myself, what causes a society to collapse like that? And one of the things I thought about was they didn't have any morals in the little mouse colony that collapsed. I think it was an experiment that John Calhoun did back in 1972, where he had this big, huge mouse colony that had all the space that the mice need and all the food that they need. But what happened was the society of that particular colony collapsed because it was just watching how that thing took place. When people have all the food they want, they have all the space they want, what would they devolve to? And in the final result, the entire colony collapsed. And one of the things that he noticed in that colony was that it was a bunch of mice who were just to themselves. All they did was just groom themselves. They didn't do nothing. They didn't mess with the ladies or nothing. They just chilled out. They call those mice the beautiful mice. And then after that, there was a situation where there was a bunch of rough mice, you know what I'm saying? Those mice that went around, keeping other mice away from the women so they couldn't mate or whatever. And they got to fighting all the time. They just built up this big bridge and couldn't nobody get past. And then all of a sudden the women were in a corner, with their babies or whatever. And all of a sudden they just stopped caring for their babies and they didn't want to have no more and they didn't want to take care of them. So this society collapsed. And I thought to myself, are we looking at that today? Are we choosing the right mates based upon natural urges instead of the better parts of ourselves? And I think that all comes down to how we operate and how we select our mates. And I was actually, perusing, these TikTok streets or whatever. Of course, that's why I get a lot of my content. And I couldn't help but notice there's always this conversation about a provider male. You know what I'm saying? It's like men have been reduced to being just providers. You know what I'm saying? So I was thinking to myself, I was like, well, is that it? Is that all? You know what I mean? If you think about it, it's always something that a man has to do. And then that's it. That's his existence. So I'm thinking that we're more than that. Anytime you go back and look in history, whenever a man is inspired, it's always inspired by something great, something greater within himself. And normally what happens is they have situations where normally he's inspired by his woman, his family, his country. He's inspired by something, by God. So I think that I heard a poem, a saying a long time ago. It said, we all rise to the level of our incompetence. And most times, most men only rise to the level of what a woman asks their man to do. We've always heard women ask for a man to be a protector, provider. And I'm thinking to myself, there's got to be something missing. Marriage is supposed to be one of those things where it's supposed to be a representation of God's love demonstrated here on earth. You have Christ who died. He was the head of the church. And then, of course, he had the church, the bridegroom. So I'm thinking to myself, if they treated Christ the same way like we treated regular men, which we are made in his image, then what would that look like? They would only ask God to provide and protect, and that's it. And as long as I've been in these TikTok streets, I've never, ever heard a woman say, ask a man to be, her prophet. I've never heard it, which leads me to believe if there's a saying in the Bible say you have not because you ask not. Well, I think the reason why the society is the way it is because women are not asking men to be prophets, and I think in essence, you kind of need both. You know what I mean? You kind of need both. So I'm going to go ahead and share a video with you guys to set the table so we can talk about this a little bit more. This is a video that I found on TikTok and I share with you guys. And we're going to lean into it and I'll give you the example of both examples. So here's the first one that comes up.
By emotions and feelings, you will be able to see what it really is. I wasn't delusional about the man that I had. He was a good man. He was a provider man. He was a great lover. But he was also an insecure man.
Yeah.
And I knew that the women before me, they were not like me. I was the first of he ever, you know what I'm saying? Not to say they any diss to them, no. But this man was somebody that knew of me from years ago when I was in my prime. You know what I mean? And I didn't know him, but he used to see me. He said, Tiffany, I remember you used to be in the mall with your daughter, with your fur coats, matching fur coats. You had an E-class. That was my prime, like my early 20s. He knew what he had. He was with women, and he told me when he and I were friends, because I was friends with him and never touched him for almost like 8 months. We were just cool, and he was teaching me how to ride motorcycles. And he told me, he said, you know, Timmy, you too trendy. I don't like trendy women. If a woman was trendy, it's because I made her that way. And that's what he did. He made his women. He bought them cars, paid for school, moved them in. You know, he was a provider. So he wasn't used to a woman that could floss as hard as him on her own. So I knew, like, okay, but I had gone through a hard time. A lot of things had happened, and he gave me a soft place to land. And I'll forever be grateful to him for that. But see, some women take that and think, oh, this is my end all. We supposed to know he ain't your husband. He is there for a season. He's going to help you get through that season. Once that season is over with, it's time for you to go.
Where did you get this game from? I'm telling you. Was you born with this game? That's game. Like, that's mature game. That's the game.
You know what it really is?
What is it?
It's just the knowledge of self and being true to you. I ain't never wanted to be like nobody else but myself. And I was comfortable with me. I don't have all the answers, and I'm not like just some big time guru type person, but I love Tiffany.
Once it's no longer convenient, we move on.
And that's the part that a lot of men don't like, though. Because men, you all are used to routine and repetition. You understand? So once
that's
a man...
That's anti-Gemini, right? Y'all don't speak that. No.
I conformed for as long as I could.
Yeah.
When I needed him and I needed what he was offering. And that's the thing, like, women go wrong when they try to make a man something other than what he truly is. I believe that your experience comes from what delusion you have about that man. I deal with men for who they are, not for what they could be. I knew that he was a provider. I knew that bills was going to get paid. I knew the car was going to have full tank of gas, good tires, all the basics that I needed at that time. The essentials.
Comfort.
Yes. And that's what he gave me. Even just from how he kept the house. I could have, the routine, once my season changed and I knew it was time for me to elevate, I knew he couldn't go. Because
he wouldn't have went for this.
Absolutely. I told my followers all the time, I said, do you understand? If I had stayed in my relationship, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing. I knew that. And I knew when I was ready to make that transition, even with, I have an e-commerce business. My e-commerce business is what helped me to retire from a 27-year career as a hairstylist. Why you want to retire? You a good hairstylist. You think it's going to work out? You this and that, you da-da-da. They didn't believe in me. You understand? They wanted me to still be a hairstylist. They wanted me to stay in the same energy that they met me in because they weren't evolving. So, you know, I'm like, that right there let me know that I was making the right decision to make my exit. I'm going to be honest with you. It wasn't because he cheated. It wasn't because he got caught cheating.
It's because you knew he was going somewhere.
Yeah. And I knew he couldn't go. I have never loved anybody as much as I love myself. So when you love yourself for real, you make the best decisions regarding your future, your life. And being that way is not conducive of a wife. So that's why I knew I was just always about me. And I knew that I would not be a good wife having that type of mentality. So I've always stayed single.
Mm.
And there you have it. Sometimes, having a husband who, pays all the bills and says the right things or whatever, you know what I mean? It don't always guarantee your wife is going to stick around. In those particular situations, she felt like, hey, I made my money and I'm going to move on, and you can't inspire me. You can't move me. You know what I mean? She's not in a position where she wants to give him what he needs so he can develop, or he couldn't give her what she needed to inspire her to be all that she needed. It's just a typical guy. You know what I mean? He might be, all this other things. That man might guard your heart and your life. He might provide and sacrifice, and be present, but he's not, one that comes in and double checks all the locks, and, he shields you and defends your name and honor and all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, we're more than just humans. You know what I mean? And the next one, I got another video. This was a real popular one. This one hit like about 4 million views, of this lady who said that she had the perfect husband. He did everything. So, and she was contemplating, divorcing him. So I'm gonna go ahead and add this one to the stage too.
I don't know if I'm going to actually post this because this is super vulnerable for me and I'm a pretty open person. But earlier this year, I told my husband I wanted a divorce. And this would probably shock a lot of my friends and my family because I hadn't told anybody, okay? I walked myself through the logistics of where would I live, how would we split the time with the kids, who gets the dog, where all of those things, okay? Had a full breakdown. I feel like I have been searching for something in my relationship that we don't have for the whole time we've been married, which has been 10 years. There is not a single thing about my husband in and of himself that I do not love. Let me be very clear about that. He is the most self-disciplined, loyal, hardworking, good person that you could meet on this planet. And that is probably the reason why I have not left. Okay? Our relationship and what my expectations are for my marriage and what they always have been are not met, right? Which I don't know if anybody's are. The reason that pushed me to even bring up divorce and talk about it was the fact that I feel like I can't be myself with my husband. And it's really confusing because I'm 32 years old. I am a mom of 3. And I still don't know who I am. So for me to be like, oh, I can't be myself, or you don't love me for who I am, isn't really fair because I don't know who I am. I'm figuring that out every day. But the reason why I wanted to share this on here in the first place is we are coming up on our 10-year anniversary. We're going to Mexico, to Cabo, for our 10-year anniversary trip. And we're rewriting our vows. We never wrote vows in the first place. We didn't have vows when we got married. And I'm struggling to write my vows, like to write a vow. And I think that's because I still feel very unsure in our relationship. The one thing that we finally talked about this past week together, because it's just been something that since we kind of talked about it and I brought it up and we committed to change and we committed to working on our relationship, I started my own business. He quit his job. Roles have changed. Life has been crazy. And we just haven't come back to talking about this subject. And I brought it up again because I'm like, I'm going to be honest with you, like writing these vows is hard. I don't feel like we're any closer. I don't feel like anything has really changed since I brought this up 6 months ago, 9 months ago, whatever. And I want to work on our relationship. Like at the end of the day, of course I could get a divorce and try to go find the love that I'm craving with somebody else. But that's going to come with its own hardships, its own complications, and ones that I'm not willing to take on, right? I love Ryan. He is the best father, okay? I just need to learn how to explain what I need from him in our relationship, and he needs to be able to give that, and I need to be doing the same for him so that we can both, like, in 10 years from now, in the next 10 years, look back and say, Like, we put in the work and we finally have the marriage and the relationship that we have always wanted, and that is what I want. I guess the reason why I'm coming on here, and if you've made it this long, that's really nice. What have you done in your relationship to get to that point? If you have been in a place where we are and have worked through it and have found things that have brought you closer or that have given you that relationship, like, I'm just, I guess, asking for advice. Like, what have you done in order to get there, and what has worked for you? We're honestly willing to try anything. We have done therapy and counseling before, and it was fine, honestly. It wasn't like my favorite thing, but I'm willing to try that again. And I don't know, books, podcasts, like what have you guys done that has worked for you to get your marriage to where you want it to be? I just don't like thinking, okay, we've been married for 10 years and we've kind of like been at this same point the whole time. I just don't want to look back 10 years from now and not have tried my best to have this like relationship that we both want and that we deserve and that our kids deserve to see in us. So I'm kind of being vulnerable and posting this on here, but I would just like to know, like, what has worked for you and what advice, I guess, you would have for me.
All right. In this particular situation, she really doesn't know what she wants. She says she's not happy. She went to therapy, which is the hot topic that we had Tuesday, about how therapy is feminizing men. And I don't really think that she's getting what she's getting out of that because there's no direction. You know what I mean? There's something that's missing in both of those particular situations. That's why we're here to read in between the lines. When a man does not have direction from God, it leaves a woman empty on the inside. And the killing part about it is if that woman is not close to God, she doesn't know exactly what to do or how to fill her role. Sometimes people get in relationships and they think that the other person is supposed to do everything. When that's not the case. Both players have their own particular roles. And I'm going to share something with you guys. I'm going to share my screen because I think this is leading into what we're talking about tonight. This is actually from Proverbs 14, 1 and 3. And it says, every wise woman buildeth her house, but the foolish plucketh it down with her hands. He that walketh in the uprightness fear the Lord, but he that preserve in his ways despiseth him. And in the mouth of the foolish is a rod of pride, but the lips of the wise shall preserve them. Here's the situation with that. The reason why most people don't have what they need is because they don't know how to act. They don't know how to ask. They don't know how to inspire. Inspiration is one of those things that comes from the inside, and it's a cup that you have to pour into yourself so you can pour into others at all times. And I think a lot of times people miss that, they really do. And I think a lot of women have gotten out of the practice of learning how to pour into their man to get that something extra out of them. You know what I mean? And it's okay for a man to provide because that's what we do. We hear it all the time, protector and provider. We hear that, we know that, that verse, song and dance, word for word. But I've never heard a woman say, will you be my priest? Will you be my prophet? And I think that when you ask a man that type of question, it forces him to come into reality to become something more than what he is. He's going to be forced to have a relationship with God. And what that happens is when a man has a relationship with God, he walks with a different type of confidence. Now, here's to say, there's not going to be days that are not going to be rough. We already know that. If you go through the Bible, it's littered with situations where men have had to endure a lot of stuff. But I tell you, masculinity itself is forged in the furnace of adversity. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. I was sitting in a podcast listening, ear hustling, with a few of our sisters, and they were talking about femininity and how, women should be princesses. And I'm thinking to myself, why not queens? They were saying, well, princesses don't have a whole lot of responsibility. I'm like, that's an imbalance, don't you think? You know what I'm saying? There's a king has to have a queen. And I think a lot of times we've stopped women and they've had arrested development at the princess, portion of their development. I think it was Shahrazad Ali who said that most women stop progressing when they get about 14. And I'm thinking to myself, that's about the princess attitude, the princess level of how this works, where you want to look good, you want to, have all the trappings and the luxuries or whatever. But when you become a queen, there's some responsibility that comes along with that. And I think a lot of times, sometimes the rhetoric that goes into it, a lot of our sisters don't always have the opportunity to learn how to be queens. And I was telling her, I was like, it's cool to be a prince, but eventually you got to graduate to king. And I told her, I said, my whole entire life, I've been, working to be a king, even to this day, you have to develop over time. And as you get older, you should be a better version of yourself each and every single day. And with that, you have to learn how to be a king. And with king comes, being a servant. And how you serve people is you have to know people. You know what I mean? You have to know how to serve people, because there's a certain level of trust that comes into when you actually have to have somebody's safety in your hands. And being a leader from a smaller age into an older man, it's one of those situations where it comes natural. You learn how to listen to other people. You learn how to figure out things. You learn how to hear from God. Those are the things that you need to be a prophet, the type of husband that woman would be proud to have. But the thing about it is, if you haven't developed, that skill to understand exactly what you have, a knife in the hands of a wrong person is a weapon, but a knife in the hands of a chef is a great tool. And it's how you handle that device is what really is the outcome, and even in the beginning in Genesis, when God made man, he said he made him in his image. And I also heard in the Bible, he said, you have not because you ask not. So I'm thinking to myself, if you ask a man to do something, he'll become it. You know what I mean? Just think about it. If you had a husband who was a captain of a ship, he becomes proficient at being, a captain of a ship. He can, he can navigate those storms, and also in cool and calm weathers. He knows where he is at all times. If you ask your husband to be a doctor, you know what I mean? He goes to school, he learns everything he needs to learn, and he becomes a doctor. If you ask a man to be a prophet, he goes and he dwells with God, and he learns how to be a prophet and a minister, and a pastor. So I'm thinking to myself, ladies, the reason why you don't have the men that you want is because you haven't asked them yet. And I think that is the key. I'm going to go ahead and share another video that kind of speaks to that and how you can get the absolute best out of your husband and also know how to spot them when you see them.
Most of you don't know what it takes to be the wife of a prophet. You don't. You can't even imagine. It's so, people say, I just want to be, man of God, there is a prophet who said he wants to marry me. Pray for me. You don't know what it is. What can be a joke to me now will not be a joke next moment, depending on how God has touched me in the few seconds. So when you are that, you realize this person I married is not a person. This is a spirit I married. He has a time to give me as a man. But there are moments I have to also tune in the same frequency. And this is not the time to talk about this. This is the time to talk about this. If you marry a spiritual person, whether evangelist, teacher, or just any brother or sister, you got to learn when the action is upon them. When heaven is over them, you can be moving around in the bedroom, chasing each other, up and down, jumping on the bed. Calm down. Chase each other there. Slap each other. Hey, you. Next second, God can descend there and say, I want you to talk to this one about this. Pray now about this. Be conscious about this. Now, the same friend you were. And you now from your nini, you just got in and got married to this man. Like he's not responsive. To what exactly? What were you thinking? So you want this and you want this, the best of both worlds. You can't get it. You cannot.
So in this particular situation, he's telling you want the best of both worlds, but you can't get it. Now, a lot of times you have to also allow a man to be what he's going to be, and you're going to have to support that, and you got to be okay with that. I'm going to give you another example of how a wife could support a husband being a prophet.
Israel, I'm Sister Adina, and I'm here with
the Sister Amana from the House of Officer Solomon, New York headquarters.
What is it like being married to a prophet in IUIC?
Being married to a prophet in IUIC is, you have to know what the life is going to be like for this man. So he's going to be going to camp, possibly going abroad and teaching, or going to different states inside the continental United States and teaching. And you have to remain flexible and understanding and not be a hindrance to his growth in the truth. It's really a wholehearted thing. Like, how are you as a wife? How are you as a friend? How are you as a mother? How are you as a sister? You know, the scriptures say, let her own works praise her in the gates. While he is out being a mentor and a brother and a leader towards other people, that you are having works for yourself so that you don't get lonely or that you don't get lost while he's out doing the work. Scriptures say, let the husbands be won over by the conversation of the wives.
Most of you.
You heard what she said. You know, that's one of the things I think we miss. You can't be distracted by the trappings of the world, thinking that you're missing out. I want you guys to pay attention to her face. I know you guys heard her words, but I want you to look at the joy in her face. I think that is the joy that I think a lot of women are looking for.
Israel, I'm Sister Adina, and I'm here with
the Sister Amana from the House of Officer Solomon, New York headquarters.
What is it like being married to a prophet in IUIC?
Being married to a prophet in IUIC is, you have to know what the life is going to be like for this man. So he's going to be going to camp, possibly going abroad and teaching, or going to different states inside the continental United States and teaching. And you have to remain flexible and understanding and not be a hindrance to his growth in the truth. It's really a wholehearted thing. Like, how are you as a wife? How are you as a friend? How are you as a mother? How are you as a sister? You know, the scriptures say, let her own works praise her in the gates. While he is out being a mentor and a brother and a leader towards other people, that you are having works for yourself so that you don't get lonely or that you don't get lost while he's out doing the work. Scriptures say, let the husbands be won over by the conversation of the wives.
Let the husbands be won over by the conversations of the wives. Ladies, what are you telling your husbands? You know, are you good at having a conversation with your husband? What is your conversation like? How do you talk to him? Do you talk, life into him? You know, do you speak joy? Do you talk to the spirit man inside of him? You know, do you have conversations with God that confirms what he said when he talked to God himself as well too? And I think that is what's really missing. You know, those first two ladies, they didn't really talk to their husbands. You know, it's just like one of those things where they actually played house, basically. You know what I mean? There was no worship between the husband and the wife. It was, the usual things, but there was no worship between those two. So I think that is what's really missing. You know, I think ladies have to get good at learning how to speak to their husbands, use honey, instead of vinegar from time to time. Don't beat him up from time to time, that type of thing. And I'm pretty sure he'll want to to give you what you need. He'll also be there for you so you don't feel like you're lonely. And also a man that's actually tuning to God, he'll have God's ear, and God will turn him back and say, hey, look, you need to check on your wife, you know, that type of thing. So you always want a husband that's tuned in to God. So I think that's the difference. You know, you got to have a difference between a prophet and a provider. And yes, you can have both, you know, in situations, but the one that you choose in the beginning is the one that you're going to probably wind up in the end. You know what I'm saying? So like I said, you got to be careful. And I know some days it may seem like, you know, it may be few and far between. A lot of women say, you know, a good man is hard to find and all this other stuff. But I assure you, if you find a woman, you know, that's far above rubies, and that's a woman right there. The Bible tell you that a good wife is rare. So when you do get one, you make sure you make the best out of it. As a matter of fact, I got a friend of mine that's getting married tomorrow, and I got to make sure I do what I got to do for them. So I'm looking forward to that. But outside of that, I just want to make sure that you guys understand that this is more than what we think it is. A lot of times we have these surface level conversations about who makes more and who does this. But at the end of the day, regardless of whoever makes more, who doesn't, who shows up, who doesn't, you know, whether we split time, you know, with the kids or have time alone, you always want to make sure that at the end of the day, the marriage comes back to you and your husband, because that is supposed to be a demonstration of God's love on earth between the church and between Christ. And I think a lot of times we only ask God for to be a protector and a provider, but have you asked him to be your priest? And I think that is the major difference. Ladies, make sure that you change your conversation to what you're looking for. Be bold when you talk to these men. Be bold when you talk to your husband. Ask them for that little bit more. You know what I'm saying? That type of thing. And I think you'll get it from them. You know, like I said earlier, the scripture says you have not because you ask not. And I think that is major. And I think that he would actually relish that, because I told you earlier before in the podcast, is that a man's masculinity is forged in the furnace of adversity. And I believe that because men look forward to being the man. They look forward to being, you know, adorned. They look forward to being revered. They look forward to being honored. And I think when you don't honor him, you rob him of that masculinity. You rob him of the man that you want him to be and the man that he knows he can be. So I think that's probably one of the things we need to have a discussion about. Make sure that when you talk to your husband, you speak wise words to him when you get an opportunity. I want to thank you guys for coming out. I want to hold you up. I just wanted to make sure I shared that with you guys, just to give you a glimpse of where we need to go when we start having conversations, and make sure that we don't lean too much in one area or the other, talking about who's not doing this and who's not doing that. Let's start asking ourselves, what can we do? You know, what can we do ourselves personally to make sure that we develop and grow into the person that we need to be, and also how to support those who are around us to help them to grow and to be the persons that they need to be. I want to thank you guys so much. When you get an opportunity, make sure you guys support the channel. Make sure you guys hit Black Man Unfiltered up for the Cash App, as you can see it scrolling across here. And I also want to thank you guys for coming out on the Lost in Translation podcast. Shalom. Thank you so much for coming out. And I want to thank you guys for tuning in to another edition of Reading Between the Lines. And I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Thank you so much. Good evening and good night.